We welcome you to the November 2021 elected council meeting of the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County. We'll enjoy this music while we're waiting for all of our friends to join the Zoom meeting. We welcome you to the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County's elected council meeting. Terri Moss is our moderator today. Take it away, Terri.
Thanks, Will. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you have taken time out of your precious day to spend it with us, and I hope you'll find this meeting inspiring. We'll start with calling the meeting to order, and I'm going to do that and include land and labor acknowledgement. And so we're going to start, hopefully, if you wish, by taking a moment now to settle your body, to get rid of all of the tension or preoccupations that you had coming into this meeting. With your feet, feel your feet on the ground and take some deep breaths and fill your lungs with air. Relax into this moment. Being present now can allow you to open to new information and see your own reactions and prepare for action going forward. As we acknowledge the lands we work, serve, and play upon, let us remember the first inhabitants of these lands. We acknowledge that Contra Costa County is also the ancestral homes of the Bay Miwok, Ohlone, and Tachiokuts people. I apologize if I didn't say that right. With each group having their own relationship with the highest peak, who the colonizers called Mount Diablo. We acknowledge the wisdom held by these human ancestors in their relationship to this land, and we seek to learn from their long stewardship. This land was forcibly taken from indigenous people, and the violence that occurred then and continues now is a source of grief and shame. Acknowledging this past, we also want to work towards racial justice now and for the future in the way we as people of faith live on this land, which includes revisioning the way we humans see our place in the world, how we interact with each other, as well as other species. We seek to learn from the plants and other animals who currently inhabit this habitat and those displaced or lost through violence and land mismanagement. Otters, beavers, grizzlies, antelope, chub, and kangaroo rat, thistle, grass, and tule. As people of faith and good conscience, justice means moving from exploitation to recognizing interdependence at all levels of being. We must also acknowledge that this country was built on the free enslaved labor of Black people and that labor was violently enforced for hundreds of years. Let's honor the legacy of the African diaspora and Black life, knowledge and skills stolen due to white supremacy. With this acknowledgement, let's recognize a duty to give honor through our work and continue to stand up for racial and social justice every day. Let's remember our purpose as a council in organizing against the forces of all forms of supremacy, in allying ourselves, body, mind, and soul, with the people of color-led organizations that will lead us all into the future we imagine for ourselves and generations to come. And then I've asked Susie Cole and Christine Nadeau to read our Interfaith of Contra Costa County Covenant.
I can't see the whole thing. Let me see. Our dialogue is an interfaith dialogue. We all have different communication styles and varying views. We commit to be in dialogue with respect for all, expanding, listening to hear multiple points of view. We realize that we, okay, wait a minute, I gotta go back up. We realize that we are responsible for the growth of I4C, and each of us shares a duty to interfaith growth. The governing board provides leadership, and the elected council works towards progress and the fulfillment of I4C goals as we grow.
We recognize that we are imbued with interfaith responsibility. As such, we commit to hold ourselves and each other accountable to merit that trust. Respect for the diverse traditions, beliefs, and spiritual paths of all those we encounter. Hold ourselves to the highest ethical standards and accountable to our communities and to I4C. Our shared time together is interfaith time. We commit to honoring the start and end times each time we meet.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to approve the minutes from the October 11th elected council meeting. Those were attached in the email that initially went out. So do I have a motion to approve those? A second? And all in favor, raise your hand, please. Thank you. We also have a brief reflection on that meeting from Dr. Erica Baines, our president.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Last month's dialogue between all of our faith groups was about how does your faith tradition celebrate light or the coming darkness of the season? And what do you think are the reason for the darkness? And what spiritual practices does your faith share for reducing darkness in this world. There were 4 main common themes that was discussed amongst all the groups that I was able to extract, triangulate, I should say, from all the dialogues. The first one was God is the light. God is mentioned as light in many religions, seeing God as light in all of God's creation, reaching out with compassion by action, using humility as a guide, seeking truth and not falling for illusions, falsehoods, misinformations, egoism, ignorance, selfishness, self-gratification, and seeking the truth. Those were the wisdoms, they said, is present in the religious and the faith teachings. The second theme was that festival of light and the practice of lighting, whether it's candles, lanterns, or fires, is very common amongst all religion. Almost all religious groups, all the dialogues discussed lighting of candles, lanterns, and a lot of the reference was made that light and working the path of right is what light reflects. And darkness, in many ways, some said, were like mirrors for some, and a shadow, that basically provided shadows, so basically reducing the light. When it came to lighting of candles, it was said that this basically symbolizes love and hope and warmth and celebration and commemoration. And they not just illuminate the surroundings, which basically brings about the expression of joy and reverence and reflection, but it also, in many religions, many faith beliefs, represents a divine of God. And the good and doing good and searching for truth were all part of that whole festival of lighting, or lighting of candles and diyas, which is what the Hindus lit for the celebration of Diwali. And joy, hope, love, peace were all common to why in festivals and in celebrations and prayers, there was lighting of candles or lanterns or all the other things that were lit. And mostly when it came to darkness, removing darkness with light, not just with lighting as a candle or a lantern or fire, but actually ignorance. It was very, very common, and the negativity that creeps in a human's life. So basically, the reduction of darkness by lighting was of sort of a metaphor, is what most talked about. The last theme, the fourth one, was that darkness is actually just man-made, and we should find a way, and man can make a way to reduce it. Just effort is needed. And some of the darkness that we talked about by many, which is also part of the faith, is things like conflicts, things like hate. And all it is that if one can make a daily practice of pausing and seeing when they are feeling negative or when they are entering any conflict, and back out and kind of see that everyone has a reason to speak, and perhaps they can be a little bit more patient, then they can basically reduce the darkness, and men themselves can work together to bring about light in this world.
Thank you very much for that summary and for bringing the wisdom to us. We now are honored to welcome Chief Phillip Scott, who will give us an opening faith reflection on the ritual of grieving for the lost children.
Please unmute yourself, Chief.
Thank you. So good morning, relations. I'm known as Shunkawakan Sapa, which is Lakota for Black Horse. I'm ceremonial leader in the Lakota tradition, as well as the Native American Church, and very honored to be with you this morning. I thank you, Reverend Will, for the invitation to share regarding the grief that is felt regarding the abuses that the colonizers have perpetrated upon Indigenous peoples, particularly upon the children who were abducted from their families and placed in boarding schools where serious atrocities were perpetrated. Recently, I returned from Vancouver, where I was spending time with an adopted brother of mine, and was invited to conduct ceremony for a group of men who were in recovery. And many of the stories that they shared had to do with their elders, their grandparents in the boarding schools themselves. Some of them were actually sharing their own personal experiences of the boarding school system, as this system has been in operation for quite some time. On a more personal note, my adopted Lakota mother was the product of the boarding school system, and she would often share with me while we were preparing for ceremony her own personal experience of abduction from her family and her time and experience in the boarding schools. And I think it's important to point out just the egregious violations that occurred there. She mentioned to me that she would witness the laceration of children's tongues for speaking their language, the rape and the sodomy of the children by the missionaries, the brutal beatings that they endured, the emotional, verbal, psychological manipulation as they were forced to assimilate. And the motto in the Lakota, which was a directive within the federal government, was to, quote unquote, kill the Indian and save the man, unquote. And so we're talking about an intent to undermine the identity and confidence of Indigenous people, to force them to be someone and something they are not. And this kind of systematic genocide has lasting repercussions, not only on the psyche and the soul of the individual who is receiving or witnessing directly these kinds of traumas and violations, but the intergenerational, the ripple effect that occurs into future generations, as many of these wounds are not effectively addressed and healed. I will say that my mother was rather tight-lipped about her own personal experience, but I suspect that she also endured that. And that said, she has done a lot of work, and she did a lot of work while she was alive to heal those wounds, because she actually was one of the most unconditionally loving women that I've ever met in my life. And she welcomed all people to her ceremonies, including the children of the oppressors, the colonizers themselves. And so it's a testimony to her resiliency and to her own fortitude and her own quest to heal, that she could open up those ceremonies to all people, all nations, regardless of color. And I think that before we head into a more formal grieving ceremony in terms of the atrocities that have happened at the hands of the colonizers, not only in the boarding schools, but in the name of genocide and assimilation. I think it's important to understand that for any of you on this call and in general, it speaks to the profound healing and generosity and forgiveness of Indigenous nations who are willing to share their ways of life in this time that we have of global crisis, which was also foreseen by many of the wisdom keepers and dream keepers of Indigenous nations all over the world. And so I truly wish to impress upon each and every one of you the profound act of forgiveness that many Indigenous nations are expressing toward the world, even though the world has turned a blind eye to their plight in many cases. And I believe that in some way, Canada can serve as an example to the United States on how to begin the reparation process, because in the spirit and inspiration of South Africa, with the Peace and Reconciliation Commissions in relationship to apartheid, the Canadian government at least began to make overtures and gestures toward Indigenous nations in terms of the Peace and Reconciliation Commissions there. Now, I will say that they are wholly anemic in that their actions have not followed through, kind of similar to a lot of the frustration that's happening in Glasgow right now with quite a bit of rhetoric and well-intentions, yet not a lot of action. And according to my Indigenous relations in Canada, it is the same, that there was the articulation of an expression of contrition, right? There was an acknowledgement of crimes committed against humanity and a sincere apology. And then, the two aspects of peace and reconciliation, which are also vital, are predicated on action. And so the third aspect of that would be the assurance that it would never happen again. And though the boarding schools have certainly disbanded, the act of violation against Indigenous nations is still being perpetrated in Canada as well as in the United States. And that is in the form of the acquisition of land or the desecration of land through the construction of pipelines. We had the Standing Rock issue here in the United States. We have things occurring in Line 3 right now at the mouth of the Mississippi River. These are things that are transpiring on Indigenous land. And so both corporate and governmental interests are still attempting to poison and undermine Indigenous sovereignty and their rights to how they self-determine and desire to protect and preserve their identity and ways of life. So the assurance that it will not happen again has not been acted upon. And so the other aspect is reparations, right? Actions that are taken to ameliorate the situation. That has also not occurred in Canada because for me, finances, the throwing of money at people or situations is not sufficient. And so again, there's not been actions that have been taken to allow for reparation to genuinely proceed. So for me, those are the four aspects of the peace and reconciliation that are fundamental for true healing to occur. And though Canada, as I mentioned, has not been forthright in their the third and fourth aspect of peace and reconciliation, at least there has been a formal national apology, an expression of the acknowledgement of the genocide, as well as an expression of contrition, which the United States has not done at all. And so there still is a sincere attempt to disenfranchise and silence indigenous nations in this world. And oftentimes they're never even a part of the conversation when they speak of people of color. And so I'm grateful to this council and to Will in particular for the acknowledgement of our placement here in the San Francisco Bay Area upon the lands that were sacred and continue to remain sacred to the coastal Miwok, Ohlone, Pomo nations, as well as others. And to understand that if we are not originally from this land, then we are occupying it, right? And so we request permission. And many years ago, I requested permission of a chief from one of the nations here to be able to conduct my ceremonies when I arrived here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I'd like to begin today with a song. This is a grieving song, and it is to honor the children of those who have passed due to the horrendous atrocities that they endured in the boarding school system, not only in Canada, but I'm certain that if, and the question is if, there will be an investigation into the excavation of the boarding schools around the United States, I am certain they will find unmarked graves and mass graves of the children who were murdered, at the hands of the missionaries and the government in our boarding school system. And even for those who did survive, the legacy of that pain and that suffering still exists within themselves, as well as within their future generations. And so I will speak about allyship afterward, but I want to sing a song, and I'm going to ask you all to put your hand to your heart, right? And I want you just to imagine what it would be like if your children were taken from you. And if authorities came to your door, to your home, and forcibly extracted the children, your children, the children that you were entrusted to guide and to teach, from your home and placed in a remote area where you would not have access or contact with them except maybe briefly, meaning they'd come back home once a year. And that you would not be aware of how they're being raised and trained, and know deep inside your soul and your heart that they were being taught ways of life that were foreign to your set of values and principles that you live by. Just imagine, right? Just try to somatically tune in to that sense of abuse and violation, and then knowing that your children were going to be abused by these oppressors. And then we can begin just to touch into the reality of what it's like for Indigenous peoples every single day. I'm going to sing a song, a grieving song. This is a song we sing at our Sundance for those that have made their journey. Ehe Tunkashila Wakantanka. Great mystery, great spirit, ancestors, holy ones who dwell beyond the stars, who visit us in our dreams, who walk with us. To the thunder nations who have brought the sacred waters to the sky, blessing our mother the earth with these holy rains, this first medicine. To grandfather sun who brings a blessed new day of light, illumination into the darkness within ourselves. To grandmother moon who sheds her love and her light in the night. To the sacred winds that blow, carrying my voice, disseminating it to those in need who are suffering at this time. To our beloved mother, the earth, who gives us life, who nourishes us, and to all of our relations who dwell upon this earth with us. Shunkawa Kansapa humbly expresses gratitude for my life today, for the dreams that you blessed myself and my relations with. I thank you for this new day, for the sun that shines in the sky. I express gratitude to the indigenous nations of this area who grant us permission to pray here and to live here. I pray for Oyoshinui Chozanai health and happiness to my relations gathered here in this sacred hoop today to speak of important matters. As we approach Veterans Day, I want to acknowledge all beings who place their lives on the line for the freedom of this nation and other nations. I want to acknowledge the indigenous veterans who per capita are the largest percentage in the military. Thank them for their service and their sacrifice, and for all beings, Creator, in the quest to protect the freedoms that nations have. I send my voice this day, Creator, for the souls who were lost through the boarding school system, through the systems of oppression, the violence that was perpetrated upon them, innocent children abducted from their families, placed in schools to be stripped of their identities, who were murdered in these institutions that should have protected them. I send my voice today, Creator, also for the future legacies of that pain and that suffering that is being expressed in their children and in their children's children now. I pray for healing, Creator. I pray that the oppressors and the colonizers can take responsibility to acknowledge the truth so that genuine healing can transpire and that genuine action can be taken to ameliorate the situation so that the wrongs can be righted. I pray, Creator, that those in positions of responsibility within government, within the institutions of the various religions that also occupy this land, will have the humility to express contrition, to apologize formally, and to make amends, to begin the process of reparation and healing so that indigenous nations and their contributions, innumerable contributions to this world, can be acknowledged and that they can take a seat in the family of our humanity, that their voices can be acknowledged and heard in the protection of this earth and this land, that indigenous justice and environmental justice can be seen as inseparable. I pray that this council and other councils will unite in solidarity to ensure the honoring of indigenous nations into the future so that genuine healing can transpire. I humbly ask this of you, Creator, Holy Ones, Earth, to provide us with the dreams and the insight to take the appropriate action so that we are allies in this endeavor, to remember those who have passed due to crimes against humanity, that they can be remembered so that we do not replicate this into the future. Ahecha tualo, aho mitakuye oyasi. In my final moments here to be sharing with you, and again, I express gratitude for the opportunity to articulate my truth and my experience with my Indigenous families and colleagues. Allyship is really important. And part of that means that we, if you are not a person of color, and that you have the appearance of white skin, that we understand privilege. And with that privilege comes a responsibility to act in service to those who have been and continue to be disenfranchised by systems of oppression. And that's where we use our voice and we use our financial capabilities to support Indigenous peoples, not with an agenda about what we think they require, but rather being humble enough to ask. We open our eyes, we close our mouths, and we listen to what it is that the Indigenous peoples require and need in order for them to continue to protect their sovereignty, to continue their quest for self-determination and the preservation of their identity. Because I've seen many well-meaning individuals who are not Indigenous go to the res, go to meetings with Indigenous peoples and have ideas about how they need to heal or what they need to do to improve their circumstances. And the response is usually not favorable because Indigenous peoples are not interested in the ideas from the colonizers and the oppressors unless, that's been asked, right? If you're asked to articulate your opinion or your perspective, then it's welcomed. But more often than not, Indigenous peoples know exactly what they need to do at this point in their journey to protect their interests and what they need to do. And so we come to the table or we stand, in alliance with them and lend our support, through service, through energy, through time, through love, as well as through any possibility of support financially. And in so doing, then we are instruments in, shall we say, the solution rather than perpetuating the problem, right? And so it's about giving up the colonized agenda and therefore doing our own process of decolonization, right? So all of us actually are Indigenous. We have all come from the earth. We have individuals within our own histories that have cultivated an intimate relationship to the earth and to the unseen. And through the process of colonization over time, we have been disconnected from the earth, have been disconnected from one another and from all of our relations. And so a fundamental forgetting has occurred, particularly within the colonized world. And so our own process of reconnecting with the earth, reconnecting with, indigeneity are vital for our survival in this time. And that's why it's also important for us to listen to the counsel and the wisdom of Indigenous nations who have never lost that connection to the earth and to the unseen. Because this medicine is going to be vital for our survival into the future as a species, given our current climate crisis. So I thank you all for listening and for your desire to support Indigenous justice, Indigenous rights, as well as for the environment. So really acknowledge all the work that you're doing as a council, and it's been an honor to share with you this morning.
Oh,
Thank you so much, Chief Phillip Scott. Your message is so important and we need to hear it. And I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your traditions and your history with us. So with that, we do have reports and important projects, upcoming events, and Reverend will start us off. And if I could ask the others, maybe Dave or me doing I Care, I Change, chaplaincy and Soja, to summarize in 2 minutes or less what's going on in your area, and then people can read the reports at the end of the agenda.
Well, Chief Phillip, thank you for sharing today. I wanted to share this picture of my time in Minnesota. One of the evenings we were able to join a march led by these Indigenous women who did a march on behalf of all of the lost children, and walked 3 miles across the waters of the Mississippi River and Lake Bemidji in Bemidji, Minnesota. Ojibwe and Anishinaabe peoples together, remembering, and some even telling their own stories. I've put in the written report and the agenda a lot of my own executive director report that you can see in there, including being a part of a panel at the Parliament of the World's Religions. We do have some new YouTube programs that have been recorded, including a report back from Line 3 that included myself, Karis Delkamp, and Albert Kiefner from our ICANN. Dr. Erica did a big questions on the purpose of life with the Rossmore Interfaith Council, the recording of our Bay Area Interfaith Leaders Gathering on disaster relief, and some of the other ones that we've noted before. As I've noted, we've put these interfaith skills trainings, each are about 90 minutes each. They're recorded on our YouTube channel, and we got over 100 subscribers. So we have a new link with our own name in it. So it's YouTube/C/ write it all out, Interfaith Council of Contra, Costa County, no spaces. And last night, Father Tom and I were able to finish the last recording of the 4-part series on coping with nationalisms. A very powerful series, 45 to 60 minutes in each of the episodes. They'll go up and we'll be announcing that at our annual meeting this Sunday night, which starts at 7 o'clock. And the registration is a tiny URL, ICCCC annual meeting. And it's all online this year, 7 p.m. We'll be sadly saying goodbye to our chair, Dr. Erica Baines, but saying hello to some new friends that will be joining the elected council and others that'll be stepping forward into leadership. There's a list of all of the upcoming events, and our SOJA did approve the Haitian paper last night, and so we're just waiting for the governing board. If you want to take a look at that and offer any wisdom, it's on page 10 in your thing. So on to the iCare report.
Dave, would you like to give a quick update on what's happening with iCare?
Sure. During the month of October, we completed 3 service projects. Yes, 3. We target 1, but we were able to do 3 during the month of October. We're really happy about. We did mock interviews at Opportunity Junction with their interns that are looking to improve their job situation. We did a Red Cross blood drive where we had 37 units of blood were donated, and we did the Monument Crisis Thanksgiving food bags. And many thanks to all the congregations who participated: the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Temple Isaiah, Hindu community of San Aaron and Danville, Peace Lutheran. We really appreciate this great support that we've had in these projects. And then coming up, we have two projects actually this weekend, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. We're going to do a grounds cleanup at Shelter Inc.'s low-income housing facility in Pittsburgh. It's going to be great. And then the Afghani backpack project on Sunday, where we'll be assembling 100 backpacks. And many thanks to 4 congregations here: Shell Ridge Community, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Antioch, Islamic Center Azara, and St. Isidore Catholic Church. So thanks very much for those. We have a number of future projects. We had a meeting yesterday talking about the projects we'll be putting up for the first quarter, and they're listed on the agenda, so I won't go into that, but we welcome everyone being involved, and we can certainly create more projects or different projects if you have an interest in specific areas that you would like us to focus on. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you everyone for participating in iCare. And we've got an awesome video that will be shown at the annual meeting, just a little preview. So come to the annual meeting and see what we've been up to and see what you've been up to. Next, iChange, Meg.
Yeah. So since our introduction of iChange to the EC last month, we've been continuing to do a lot of work on our modules, training modules, and also have been working on the structure of the program. We're reaching out to different communities, and I think all the details are in the report. So I think we're really at a threshold right now. So we're working to produce the kinds of materials we need to send out to people, informational materials, and that just takes time. We've commissioned an artist, and we now have a new logo that is also still being tweaked. So anyway, that's where you are right now. I think we're very excited, and Dave very kindly put together a meeting with Candace Anderson, and we met with her yesterday, and she also seemed very excited about what we're doing and gave us a lot of really good ideas on how to move forward. So we're getting there.
Wonderful, thank you. Reverend Julius, would you like to give us a quick update on chaplaincy?
Yes, we are doing well. I have been back in the facility. This is my second month. I've been back in the facility physically, meeting with young people. And with that being said, in December, we're going to, our volunteers are going to be able to come back in. So I'm going to be sending out some information today because I just got the clearance yesterday. So I'm going to be planning for our volunteers to be coming back into the juvenile hall as well as the ranch. And we're really looking forward to that. We are going to continue with our Pen Pal program for those who will not be coming back in yet. Some are not ready to come back in yet. So I will be sending out updates to the volunteers that we do have. And with that being said, we'll also be reaching out to get new volunteers for chaplaincy and for iCare. We'd like to keep both of these programs full and robust, and we'll be reaching out to everyone to help us with recruitment. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. Dennis Wasco, you want to give us a quick update on SOJA? Can you unmute yourself, please? Dennis, can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Sorry, Terry.
Only a year and a half, that's okay.
Yeah, I know. And I keep on making the same mistake.
We all do. We all do.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Terry, for my faux pas. Winter Nights is up and operating, and we opened in September, and have 5 families, and this year we are rotating to various faith communities, and the safe parking program is alive and well, and we are actually at capacity with that, with 12 cars being parking overnight, and that program seems to be quite a success. An awful lot of time at Soja has been spent on the naval weapons station issue, and on October 26th, the City Council had a meeting to pretty much finalize that CNO and CNO Discovery would be the master developer, and that they would go ahead and start making plans. So we in Soja and along with the governing board have signed a letter stating that that whole process was flawed, and that there are some issues in having CNO as the developer. That being said, we also stated that what we wanted was that in any sort of final agreement or final plans, there had to be some sort of an accommodation for the homeless, and also a certain percentage of affordable housing. And so that with those two caveats to the board, we sent the letter, and unfortunately the board went ahead and did approve CNO. And but our job now is to monitor that progress and to monitor the negotiations that are going to be done. Will had mentioned the letter to about the Haitian situation. We at Soja have approved that, and are expecting the governing board to approve that also. So that's it, Terry. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go back on mute.
All right. I probably should too. But anyway, thank you. So now we're going to move into our interfaith dialogue. And the theme for this is how does your faith tradition understand death? And some of the questions that we'd like you to explore in your small groups are: what are death rituals? What are the death rituals that your faith tradition uses? Describe a prayer that is used in connection with death. Are there annual rituals of remembrance? This was a particularly enlightening conversation that I had with my Interfaith Women's Circle, where we realized when the three Abrahamic faith traditions got together, and I realized that the Jewish tradition and the Muslim traditions have a lot of things in common. And I found that just so enlightening, and I would never have known that if I hadn't had those conversations, and our Christian friends were really intrigued by all of it as well. So I hope this is an enriching opportunity for you to learn, to express your own faith traditions, way of viewing death and managing the realities of death, and then also learning from one another. So we have until 9:40. I don't know what the time is right now, but 9:21. So we have about 20 minutes. So please take time to have this conversation, ask for someone to record, and then we will take your notes later. Thank you. Enjoy. Will, are you going to send us into groups? Great.
Welcome back, siblings.
Thank you, Will. I think you broke us into smaller groups. Is that right?
I had you in groups of 3 or 4.
Perfect. So maybe hopefully everyone had a chance to share their faith traditions' understanding of death. And we have 15 minutes to do a quick summary of the group discussions. So can we start with room 1?
David
Sure.
Longhurst, Diane Maltester, Sharon Campton.
We had representation of the Baha'i faith, Latter-day Saints, Disciples of Christ, and Presbyterian. And, you know, there weren't specific scriptures that were identified at any of these time of death, but that scripture could be used. That with Baha'i, believing that there are additional lives, the soul continues on. Death is just part of the experience, and that there is a progression. Same thing with Latter-day Saints, that existence is with God before this mortal life, this period of time, finite period of time in mortal life, and then continuing on afterward. And that there are, you know, the male priesthood are able to do a laying on of hands to help at the time of end of life with passing on the spirit, and also graveside interment that can be very comforting. And with Christianity, that there is the belief of eternal life through Christ, and in Presbyterianism, it is the witness to the resurrection. But that there's a wide range of beliefs and understandings with how services can be conducted, ceremonies, as well as what happens afterward. So there's a recognition of a lot of mystery and unknown, but fascination. Thank you.
Thank you. Room 2.
And there's 7 rooms, Terry.
Thank you.
Let me unmute myself, I think. In group 2, we were all of Abrahamic traditions, one Jewish, one Catholic, one Presbyterian, and one LDS. And found a lot of similarity in the fact that there were traditional services and prayers that are part of saying farewell to somebody and acknowledging their becoming, you know, or going to be with Jesus. The importance of having a service kind of thing where you did things for the person who has died, which they can't acknowledge, but you are aware of what you're doing for them. And an importance of there being traditions that are that help us to acknowledge our grief and to keep the memory of loved ones who've gone alive. And interestingly enough, all 4 of us had several losses in the last recent time, which I guess is not uncommon in this day and age. And that's about it.
Thank you. Room 3.
Ekanatha Pai, Reverend Julius, Naomi Ehrlich, or Nasli Sajad.
Whoever wants to be the reporter.
Okay, I'll speak for the group.
Great, thank you.
We had, oh, no, go ahead. No, I yield.
No, you go ahead. I would like you to say.
Oh, I would love for you to say it.
No.
Okay, we had a variety of traditions, and from, you know, Christian and Muslim and Indio and others. And we really discussed similarities as well as differences and cultural differences within those each faith tradition. And I think that was really the highlight of what we were able to discuss, is some of those cultural differences even within the religions, faith traditions.
Thank you. Room 4.
Carolyn Peters, Reverend Dr. Dale Weatherspoon, Meg Keeley, Reza Sharisa Day.
Who wants to speak for your
I can go ahead and brief on it. We had, as Reverend Will mentioned, Islamic Sufism, Christianity, and also some islands beliefs. In general, all of them hold together, except in islands, they were more on like Christian sides. Every soul goes back to Jesus and to the heavens. And in Islamic Sufism is more being very objective about it, in a sense that death is a ladder toward progressions, and every moment you are dying to the next moments. And that like being born again, there are 7 days, 40 days, a yearly remembrance and prayers afterwards. And the remaining is similar as everybody has been addressing, and that's pretty much I summarized. If anybody else likes to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from that group? Okay, so room 5, I was in that room, and it was me and Christine Doe and Greg Kremenlev. And from the Episcopalian tradition, typically burials take place soon after death. And recently they celebrated an All Saints Day earlier this month and named the saints in their lives that they wanted to remember, people in their lives who had died. And they lit a candle for in the service, and it was very meaningful. So Greg's was raised more in a variety of Christian traditions, and is following more of a Buddhist tradition where the distinction between life and death is sort of blended. In the Jewish tradition that I'm in, it's very prescribed, and with a sitting Shiva, a burial soon after, within 3 days, the body is prepared and wrapped in white. And then sitting Shiva, which is the family setting aside 7 days in their homes to be protected and to be allowed to grieve. And the community comes in and brings food, and services are held in their home. And then there's annual remembrances and other kinds of traditions that take place, but it's very prescribed. And so we talked about that. And then Christine wanted to mention something, because we were starting talking about what one of the things that death does is it Sarah, if you could mute yourself, that'd be great. And one of the things that death does is it helps us be hopefully more cognizant and aware of the value of life. And so as we discussed that, Christine and Greg talked about meaningful Mondays, and Christine wanted to say a few words about that.
Yes, it's so important. I think when we look at death, and we want to look at the meaning of our lives. And I, as well as so many other people, have found that the Meaningful Mondays are a great way to focus ourselves both in prayer and in discussion about important issues in our lives. And so I would also direct you to Greg's comments in the chat. And so keep that in mind, Meaningful Monday. Thank you, Terri.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Room 6.
That's Felicity, Chief Phillip Scott, and Rebecca Seaman.
Phillip Scott, Chief Phillip Scott has gone because he had another appointment to go to. Rebecca is from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I wanted to get that exactly right, sorry. And she talked very beautifully about, the bit that kind of, like, this is what I wrote because it kind of really, sting of death is not as painful because of the idea that your soul goes on forever after your body has died, and everybody's going to meet up again in the future, and that would be beautiful. I love that. Chief Phillip Scott about the belief Lakota belief about ghosts and ancestors, and that, you know, given that he's just talked about the really painful history of the boarding schools, I said about how they're doing lots of rituals around the boarding schools. My own faith tradition, which is pagan, 1st of November is Happy New Year, because it's the Celtic New Year, and all the saints that the Christians do beautifully. I remember going to church and doing those. We do talk about all the souls departed over the previous year on October 31st. So we have a lot around rituals of remembrance, essentially, remembering those who died and wishing them well and hoping they go on forward. Anyway, that's us.
Wonderful, thank you. And then finally, room 7.
Yeah, I was in room 7, Terry, and we had a Sikh representation, Muslim, liberal Protestant, and Roman Catholic. And the thing that struck me was, especially in the Muslim and Sikh traditions, how they look to comfort those who are left behind, and how they take care of both possibly the 3 days right after the death, and then 40 days and so on, and help the families with food, finances, that sort of thing, just emotional support, and obviously spiritual support. Reverend Will talked about how at his congregation they're taking a look at some of a little broader, emphasizing the resurrection and celebration of the resurrection, and looking at the Celtic tradition and also the Hispanic traditions. So a little bit more time on remembrance and that sort of thing. In the Catholic tradition, we have the anointing of the sick prior to the person passing away. And then we usually have a vigil before the funeral, and then the funeral mass, and usually a reception afterwards. And then in addition to that, we have All Saints Day, which is on November 1st, and All Souls Day, which is on November 2nd. And then each day in the year, we commemorate a saint. So that's our way of celebrating our ancestors in the faith. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for sharing in such a beautiful, succinct, articulate way. Really appreciate us being able to be exposed to these different ways that we honor something that we all share. So with that, we are ridiculously on time. Thank you so much. And we will close out with a benediction from Felicity Grove with her Samhain benediction.
It's pronounced Samhain.
Sorry.
But you can't count on any pronunciation to look like it's like English from Gaelic. So Felicity, take it away.
Thank you, Felicity. Pardon me, I'm so sorry. Please unmute yourself. I should have muted myself.
It's Samhain. We're coming Anglo-Saxon.
We're having
coming from Sam is the root of summer, and Hain, like rain and bane, is the end as it goes away. So as summer goes away and we really embrace winter. So that's this time of year. And as I said, the 1st of November is in the Celtic year is between the equinox and the winter solstice. And this is when we remember all of those who have died. And we think about those people. And as we think about them, we say, what is remembered lives. And we say it again, what is remembered lives. And we say it 3 times. What is remembered lives and lives on in our hearts, and therefore can never die. And this is what we say when we remember the people that we have loved and those we've had difficult relationships with. And we wish them all the best, whether they come back to us, whether they go on to other lives in the flesh, or just go on forever, or cease to be. Whatever your belief is as is necessary. So what those who have gone before, we remember them, and we remember them with love and compassion towards them, forgiveness if forgiveness is what is needed. And forgiveness comes in all different forms, which I'm sure you've all had at length in your various traditions. And on this Remembrance Day, Armistice Day, November the 11th, we remember those who have died in conflict and war, the 6 million Jews in Nazi Germany during the Second World War, the millions, 20 million amongst, and the millions in the First World War and the Second World War, and all the world's wars before and since. May their souls rest and go on in peace with love from all of us here today. So think of those you loved and who have gone on before, and celebrate their lives. And remember that whether it is some otherworldly spiritual belief that you have about the dead, or whether it's just straight up psychology, when you remember your dead, they still live on in your mind and in your heart. So we say it together. If we wouldn't mind saying it together, we'll say, what is remembered lives 3 times. What is remembered lives. What is remembered lives. What is remembered lives and lives on in our hearts. So mote it be, and blessed be to all.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Felicity, thank you so much. And with that, we will be ending today's meeting. I'd like to encourage everybody to come to our annual meeting this Sunday. By definition, it's only once a year, and it will be a wonderful program, and I think you'll find it very inspiring. So please go back to your faith communities by email or however you communicate with them, and invite them to come as well. It's very inspiring, the work that's going on here, and they won't know about it unless they come to our annual meeting. And on Zoom, we can accommodate all kinds of people. So I hope you come.
We can fit up to 500 people Sunday night at 7. So please do share that link in the flyer. And one last announcement, if you want to go on the field trip to the Museum of American Indians in Novato on Monday, November 29th, we're going to be there from noon to 2. Some of us are going to carpool. Let me know by email if you can make it, and we have a special song for us to hear on our way out from our space here today. Thanks to Diane Maltester on clarinet and Wendy Tamis on harp.